is Oromo Voice Radio English program. Oromo Voice Radio is broadcasting to Oromia at 16-meter band or 17,850 kilohertz or on oromovoice.org website. OVR broadcasts Oromia Insight program every Monday for 15 minutes at 7:15 p.m. Oromia local time. Welcome to Oromia Insight program.
Welcome to Oromia Insight. My name is Ali Galato. Our guest today is Professor Hamdesa Tuso with me to discuss about Horn of Africa crisis, Ethiopia-Eritrea conflict and its implication for the Oromo people. Professor Hamdesa Tuso is from Department of Peace and the Conflict Study, University of Manitoba, Canada. His area of specialization, culture and the conflict, indigenous population in the process of peacemaking, international human rights, human security, terrorism in the Horn of Africa. Welcome, Professor.
Happy to be here.
What do people mean when they say the Horn of Africa?
This expression is actually a metaphor. It refers to a piece of land that projects out itself between the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean. That piece of land looks like a horn. But contemporary expression, when they talk about the Horn of Africa, is about social, political events in the region, in that region. That is small region comprised of several states, and I'm going to list them. Sudan, the Southern Sudan, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Somalia, Djibouti, Northern Kenya. This expression became popular toward the end of the 1970s when the war took place between Ethiopia and Somalia. This war was exacerbated by the presence and the competition of two superpowers, namely the United States of America and the Soviet Union. If you recall, after Somalia independence, Soviet Union supported the government of Somalia with respect to its claim on the Ogaden. And the American government supported the government of Haile Selassie with the claim that Haile Selassie is anti-communist, he is a great ally. And Haile Selassie gave them a military station in Eritrea. And so when the war broke out, then there was academics who came up with this term, Horn of Africa. It is used in the contemporary context. It was during that time two journals emerged. One was Northeast African Studies at Michigan State University. At that time, I was a graduate student at Michigan State University, and there was a committee. Originally, it was the Ethiopian Studies Committee, and then there was a Somali scholar by the name of John Johnson, and there were a couple of Somali students, so the two combined. It turned out to be the Professor Harold Marcos, who was a specialist in Ethiopia. He wanted to have a conference on Somali-Ethiopia conflict. And Johnson also wanted to do that. I was a student, a member, so I recommended to them that the area is complex, events are interconnected, interests are interconnected. Why don't you have a conference on ethnic conflict in the Horn of Africa? In my mind, there was ethnic conflict in Somalia and in Sudan, and there was, of course, bloody conflict in Ethiopia, also in Kenya. And the Somali system is along client lines. I say there is enough evidence to suggest that these events are interdependent. So why don't you have a conference on ethnic conflict in Ethiopia and in the Horn of Africa? And then the Amaras who were on campus, because at that time Michigan State University and Haile Selassie University had big connections. The Amaras faculty and students opposed the idea. So we negotiated, and the compromise was we had a conference on social conflict in the Horn of Africa. Out of that, a new journal emerged, Northeast African Studies. Then also Somali scholars started the Horn of Africa Journal, on which I serve as associate editor. So that's the kind of background, the use of this term or this phrase, the Horn of Africa.
Why is it that there are so many conflicts in the Horn of Africa and that seem to occur so frequently?
Well, the reason is that it is because of the geographical location, proximity to the Middle East, to the Indian Ocean, the Red Sea. And so you have internal or local Africans who have competing interest. And it is a complete interest over who should control the state. In the Sudan, for a long time, there was a huge war between the South and the North on the issue who should control the state. In Ethiopia, the conflict was between the Northerners and Southerners, and then between the Northerners and the Northerners, which is the Amharas versus the Tigrayans, and also Eritreans versus Amharas. And the South was essentially, as a category, conquered, colonized population. They want to alter the power dynamics. And then in Somalia, when the state of Somalia was created in 1960, it was comprised of northern Somalia, which was under the British colonial empire, and then the south was under Italy, and Djibouti was under the French, the Ogaden was under Ethiopian empire, and there was a piece of territory within Kenya under the British, which was occupied by Somalis. So you have got this unsettled and unpeaceful relationship between groups who occupy the same state, in each of the states. Then because of the geographical location, it is proximity to the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean, that external forces attracted to the conflicts, taking sides in order to establish their own interest. If you recall, the Suez Canal was created in the 1890s. Since the Suez Canal was opened by the British, the power dynamics changed in the region. The Arabs want to control even events, especially the Arabs in Egypt and other places. They want to control the Africans' events in their own terms. The Africans want to resist. The external powers, such as the British, later on the Americans, and then later on the Soviet Union, they want to influence local politics in order to interject their own interest. On top of that, there is historic coming of Semitic religions, namely Christianity. Christianity came to Ethiopia around 400, northern Ethiopia, that is in Tigray, Amara area, about 400 AD. And then Islam came to the region after a century after its own creation, formation. And all these identities, they project themselves in the region. The actors utilize these identities to maximize their interest. This is what makes the case in the conflict very complicated. Just to give you an example, people like me, we lived through the Cold War. In case of Ethiopia, when I was growing up in the 1960s, 70s, the American government was supporting the government of Haile Selassie against Somalia. And as I said before, the Soviet Union started supporting Somalia against Ethiopia. Neither of these powers are interested in the people in the region. They're interested in protecting their own power. Then now, more recently, since 1989, the government in the Sudan, declares an Islamic government. So the Middle Easterners, particularly who are interested to promote power through their religion, they supported that regime. And that regime had its own contradiction with the local peoples, so they play powers in different ways. And so this is why it is very complicated and then the dynamics change, and then the power interplay comes back in different forms, but the sources are the same. The internal discontent, disagreement, and then the external involvement, interventions at different times from different directions.
Currently, there is a war drumbeat about war between Ethiopia and Eritrea. Can you explain to our audience the historic relationship between Eritrea and Ethiopia? There was also a war between the two from 1998 to 2000. Why so much and the repeated animosity between the two?
Well, this is a very complicated history of Ethiopia. That is, Ethiopia, in contrast to the claim many have made, Ethiopia is 2,000 years old, stable, the beacon of freedom, anti-colonialist, that's a mythical Ethiopia. The Ethiopia never existed. So what you have in Ethiopia is an imperial system where the northerners, the two groups, the Eritreans until the Tigrayans and the Amharas compete for power, and they completely have never settled. Then you have the southerners who are the majority. If you recall, when Emperor conquered in the south, the southern Ethiopia increased by 2/3. And so this created a huge power imbalance. And in case of this issue between Eritrea and Ethiopia, let's go back to a little history, a brief history. That is, Eritrea was a colony of Italy for 50 years. When the Italians lost the war during the Second World War, Ethiopia fell under the British Empire. Later on, 10 years under the UN mandate. That means 70 years of a separate political system to Ethiopia. During the same time, the Eritreans were much more exposed to more technology from the Italian occupation, British occupation, by the fact that they bordered the Red Sea. They acquired more technology, more sense of democracy. So came around 1950s, 1960s, Ethiopia requested that Eritrea become part of Ethiopia on the claim that it was part of Ethiopia. It also on the claim that it's a part of decolonization process. There was negotiation with the UN, and the negotiation was that there should be a confederation or a federation. And then under that, once the UN left, Emperor Selassie subverted the agreement and then sent his son-in-law, Angata Masai, the husband of his oldest daughter, to be the governor and the governor of Eritrea. Also during the 1960s, this was the time of modern education expanding in Ethiopia, but Haselassie and his government wanted education to be the image of the Amhara culture, the promotion of Amharic language, the promotion of Ethiopia under Amhara domination. The Eritreans resented this. Initially, the Eritrean liberation started in 1960 after Haselassie overtook Ethiopia through power, abrogating the agreement to make a federation. It was started by the lowland Muslims. And the Christians wanted to be with Ethiopia because Eritrea, the northern Eritrea or the highland Eritrea is part of Tigray. They speak the same language, they come from the same ethnic origin. But the new identity of Eritrea was created through this colonial history, which I briefly described. And so by late 60s, early 70s, the war between Ethiopia and Eritrea expanded. The Eritrean liberation broke into two parts. The Eritrean People's Liberation Front, EPLF, became very powerful, very sophisticated under Isaias Afwerki. They waged a big war. And so The movement has not collapsed in 1974.
This interview will continue next week.